So today I wanted to talk about some horror films you can find online streaming completely free right now on Tubi, and I also think they're legitimately pretty good. But when I was coming up with the 5 to put in this video, I wanted to add some diversity to it so you guys had some options based on your preferences, some subgenres you like, you dislike. I came up with this blend of films, and I also think these are some lesser known films to some extent. Not necessarily unknown, but ones that don't get the praise, don't get the flowers. They don't get mentioned in every one of these videos I seemingly stumble upon. If you're a horror movie connoisseur like me, you'll have heard of the majority of these, but I still wanted to bring light to them, recommend them to you guys because I do enjoy them all. So let's get into it. Here are 5 films you can find on Tubi for free right now, starting off with an honorable mention. And that honorable mention is the Poughkeepsie Tapes. And I know what you're thinking probably. I'm using the word great pretty loosely if I'm talking about the Poughkeepsie Tapes. But no, it's not great, but I think it's pretty effective at what it's trying to do because it's a found footage film. It's kind of taking place like a documentary where they're after this serial killer, they're studying him. And what they have happening is they're finding this guy's tapes where he has like 300 or 400 crimes he's committed and nobody's ever found these tapes. They don't know what's on him. So what you're watching is some incredibly creepy and unsettling visuals of his crimes from the perspective of somebody who would have stumbled upon these tapes. The tapes are filmed incredibly grainy. Like I said, they're very disturbing. There's a couple scenes related to balloons I think are actually the scariest, creepiest, most unsettling part of these. This is the only film on this entire list I've actually done a formal review of already on this channel. You know, you just follow this guy around from his POV watching these grainy tapes as he commits these crimes, tortures people, kidnaps, and does all these crazy things. Just makes you feel like you need a shower after you see it, you know? In my review for this one, I said that what you think of this film is probably going to be pretty divisive. It will depend on a couple of things. So if you're the type of person who thinks visuals are scary and you think like the acting is poor, things like that, you'll probably hate this film, think it's just a snuff film. But if you're the type of person who thinks serial killer documentaries, like the psyche behind them, the fact that this type of guy could be out there committing these crimes and not being caught, this film might terrorize you. It might be the scariest film you've ever seen. Because what they're depicting in this, that this serial killer has never been caught, the types of crimes he did, the fact that nobody was off limits, kids, women, men, he killed anybody in every different way. If you think the idea of that guy being around there somewhere is what makes films scary, this film might terrorize you. So yeah, this is not a film I would say I really enjoy, but more so appreciate because I do think it is effective at what it goes for, but I'm probably not going to watch it again. Now getting to the film on this list that is probably the most well-known film, and it is my favorite film out of all the ones I'm going to talk about, that is The Lost Boys. Now I really don't know how any horror fan hasn't seen The Lost Boys, or they would call themselves a vampire movie fan if they haven't seen it, because this film, I feel like just about everybody who's seen it loves it. It has Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric. You have this family that moves to this town that's inhabited by vampires. You know, if you like vampire films, check this one out. It's probably my favorite vampire film ever. It's just a ton of fun. They're having a lot of fun with the 80s, and the music in this is great also. There's so many comedic laughs, so much fun between Kiefer Sutherland and the main character, the Frog Brothers. There's so many memorable characters in this when they're trying to hunt vampires. It is a horror comedy, again, as I said, so there are a lot of jokes, and I actually think the comedy in this is pretty damn effective. I've probably seen this film like 25 times. I have to review it formally at some point. So this is the one I'm sure basically everybody watching this has probably seen, The Lost Boys. If you haven't seen this film, go check it out. I really can't talk about it enough. Moving on to the next film, which is also a favorite of mine when it comes to its genre, and that is Train to Busan. Now this is a foreign film. It's in Korean, but it might be dubbed. I'm not really sure, but it's also probably my favorite zombie movie of all time. I know it's kind of garnered a little bit of a reputation. People talk about it a lot more now, but I feel like not enough people have because it is so good. When I first saw this a couple of years ago, I could not believe how much I enjoyed this film. It is by far the coolest film when it comes to the way the zombies are designed, in my opinion. You have these incredibly fast and relentless and gory and violent zombies. They're like smothering. When you're watching this, you can't believe anybody's going to survive. I love the way they created the zombies in this. What it's about, you have this dad, he's bringing his daughter on this train to Busan to meet her mother, and obviously there's a zombie outbreak on the train, which sounds really generic, but it's also done incredibly well, where there's some really cool characters in this that are memorable. There's a lot of heart to it. There's some good laughs at certain points. I just think this film is the total package again. This is a film, much like The Lost Boys, the two on this list. I think both of these films are in the rare category, I would say, are basically perfect films. There's nothing about either of these films I didn't like. This movie is just absolutely heartbreaking. It has some good violence. It has some good action. It has a great story. I cannot recommend it enough. Go watch Train to Busan if you haven't seen it and get back to me. Now, coming in after that, and probably the most controversial film on this list, just because some people might say it's not a horror film, but you know, I think the concept of being buried alive is pretty terrifying. So I added Buried by Ryan Reynolds. And this might be a hot take, but this is actually my favorite Ryan Reynolds film, and I also think it's his best performance he's ever done in a movie. You know, I know it's more lucrative at the box office to do these comedies. That's kind of what he is now. He's a cartoon, but I wish he'd go back to doing some serious roles because I think he's really good in this. It follows this guy. Obviously, he's buried alive. He doesn't know by who, where, why. He knows nothing. It's a complete mystery. He just wakes up in this very small box and it's crumbling in. So you have a very claustrophobic horror film, and that's where this movie's at its strongest. If you're somebody who has the fear of being buried alive, if that's one of your scariest things, this film might eat you up because it is extremely intense and claustrophobic at times. It's very dramatic. It's mysterious. I really appreciate the mystery of this. You really feel like you're rooting for this guy. You're in the box. You really don't know what's going on. Who did this? Why? And this film excels where a lot of these films fail, I think, because the scale of it stays very small. And I think that's very smart. They don't take you outside the box for any reason. No flashbacks, not meeting other characters, not seeing how he got there. It just keeps you confined to the box, which makes the scale of this feel very serious and very intense. It gives you no breather in that regard. So as things are getting worse, things are getting better, you're there for every step of it. You're rooting for this guy. And it also has one of the most intense and shocking sequences in the movie I can remember in quite some time. So if you're looking for something that's definitely a low budget slow burn, but one that I think is highly effective and has a damn good payoff, I recommend you watch Buried. Great movie. The next film on this list I wanted to talk about is actually the original Black Christmas, which is a slasher film. It takes place around Christmas at this sorority house. And I've always really enjoyed this film. I kind of don't understand why this film doesn't get thrown with the likes of Halloween and Friday the 13th and all these very famous genre-breaking films. I think this film is very influential and it's really good. It holds up after about 50 years. It's one of those holiday films. If you like those Christmas films where it's taking a holiday-centric theme and you're adding a slasher vibe to it, this might be the film for you. Even though it is a little bit older, I don't think it shows its age. I really like how it does feel like you're really isolated during Christmas in this. You're in this sorority house. There's Christmas lights everywhere, snowing outside, cold, they can't leave. It's just very, again, claustrophobic in some sense because you're rooting for these characters, but you know something's going on within the house. And this film, in my opinion, the more I've seen it and the longer time has went on, I just feel like it's so admirable. All of the tropes they established, you know, calling from inside the house, slasher themes, some of the final girl aspects, the way they wrote their characters. I think this film is well above average for its time. Again, I don't really understand why it's not heralded to the same degree some of these other films are, because I think it's really, really good. And I know they made two shitty remakes of this movie. The most recent one, which is like the feminist propaganda one, that one is dog shit. But Black Xmas is actually okay, the most recent one, in its own regard. This one is significantly better than those. So if you've seen the two most recent ones and you just thought they were terrible, give this one a chance if you haven't seen it. It's a slasher. It's about these sorority girls surviving this creepy guy who's calling them every single day, breathing in the phone, just doing these weird antics. It will unsettle you. It will creep you out. I think it's a highly effective slasher that has some really cool scenes. It's a classic for a reason. Go check out Black Christmas. And the last film I wanted to talk about on this list, which might be, again, controversial a little bit, calling it a horror film, but I definitely think it is, and that is Frailty by Bill Paxton. This is another film that's kind of went under the radar for a long time, but I think it's garnered the right amount of hype in the last couple of years. I've seen a couple of famous YouTubers review this, thankfully. I've always loved this film. Got Bill Paxton, Matthew McConaughey, some others. And the premise is you have this loving everyday dad who works at this car shop. And one day he just comes home and he says he had a vision that God told him to kill demons. That's his purpose on earth. And inherently that just sounds weird, but it seems okay. But the list of demons he presents to his kids are all the people they know. So you have this weird premise going on where you have these two kids who love their dad, and he's a loving guy. Like, that's the interesting thing about this. He's not a bad guy. And these two kids are at a total divide where one of the kids thinks their dad is just insane and he's lost it, and they can't approve of these acts because he's trying to teach them to do it as well. And the other son is just completely on board. He believes his dad. He thinks this is their calling. You have this very weird premise where you have to think about it like, what would you do if your parents came home and told you this? What would you do if your brother thought this? And it's just a very interesting take on, I guess, religion horror, where you have this guy going around killing demons and he's saying it's a message from God, and you're kind of confused. Is it a message of God? Is he just insane? And I just think it's done incredibly well. It's incredibly unique. It's a shame we lost Bill Paxton so early. He was great in this film. I believe this is his directorial debut, if not his only film, which is genius for his first film. So I don't know how he came to make this. I read something somewhere that only a guy who's an actor would ever get this movie made because it would have been so controversial. Any real director would have been afraid it would have flubbed at the box office. But since he was an actor, he was almost naive and ignorant to what would have happened. But I cannot recommend Frailty enough. I love this film. I think it's very smart. It has some twists. It has a really good ending. The payoff is definitely worth it. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out, as well as all the others on this list. They're all worth your time. So there you have it, guys. That's my list of 5 pretty good horror films you can find streaming completely free at Tubi right now. If you've seen any of these films, if you have any preferences, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of them, but I think they're all worth your time. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I do it all on this channel. I do new release reviews, scary stuff, videos like this. Join me down below. I'd love to have you, but that's all I got in this video. Peace.